key thing for us was, could we give these students, remember these are mostly in their 20s to late 20s, could we give them enough information to give their informed consent to a decision about whether they were prepared to go on a trip to North Korea accompanied by a journalist. The thing that the North Koreans look out for is journalists. They don't distinguish particularly between a Panorama journalist or an ITV journalist. The students needed to know the risks they were running if they were caught with a journalist, and we told them what those risks were. We told them that they could be arrested, they could be detained, they could be deported. We made that very clear to them, twice in London before they left here, and once in Beijing on the way into North Korea. This was a trip that took place last year, organised by the same person who organised it this year, who happens, yes, to be married to a BBC journalist. It would have happened without the BBC being involved. It would have happened if the BBC had pulled out. This was a trip that was going to happen anyway, that the BBC piggybacked on. It was up to these students as adults to assess the risk themselves, and up to us as an organisation to make sure that they had the information to do that, and I'm totally satisfied that we did. They knew that they were being accompanied by a journalist, and that was the material fact that they needed to know in order to make up their minds whether this was a risk they were prepared to take. As they got closer to North Korea, we told them exactly what the makeup of the BBC crew was, but the key thing was from the very beginning, before they'd handed over any money, before they'd signed up to this trip, they had been told the nature of the fact that there was a journalist going along with them. There's absolutely no evidence that we were risking the lives of these students. Had we had any kind of assessment that said we were putting their lives at risk, we would have done something very different. We would have pulled out of the trip, I'm sure. Our assessment was that the most likely outcome, were it discovered that there was a journalist on the trip, was that these students might be deported. The risk, I think, lay primarily with the BBC crew, and we wanted to keep it that way. We wanted to make sure that the students knew enough to make up their minds about whether they wanted to take the risk, the added risk of having a journalist on board with them, but that they weren't part of the deception of the North Korean government, which was our responsibility. The LSE wasn't involved in this trip. This is not this society is separate from the LSE. It's autonomous and independent. So the LSE were not in the fray. We didn't deceive the LSE. We didn't involve them because they weren't actually involved in the putting together of this trip. We made a very thorough risk assessment. We conveyed that to the students who were actually going on the trip, and I think that's the appropriate and right way for us to have done it. The thing we've got to hold on to here is there is an overwhelming public interest case in seeing at this moment what's going on inside North Korea. The temperature in that region is extraordinarily high. We hardly ever get a glimpse inside this country, and for us to see now what the atmosphere is like, what the mood is like on the streets, is a very, very powerful piece of public interest journalism. I'm very glad that we've done that. So yes, actually, I think we made the right decisions, we gave the right level of information, and I'm happy with where we are.